What if your body was still reacting to a crisis that you may not even remember anymore? What if your immune system hasn't still received the message that you're okay and everything is safe? This week, we're going to dive into something really interesting. It's also our bodies and how our bodies respond to crises that have happened or trauma that we've been in, and we may not even realize it's still affecting us 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. So, we're going to dive into two scientific breakthroughs that explain something that even I have felt 20 years later after the trauma. Why is it that I can still feel something in my bones that still doesn't feel quite right? Your nervous system remembers everything, even though your brain may not. And your body doesn't actually care whether the threat is still there or if it's long gone. So the recovery from a crisis or trauma where we are told to bounce back and you can do it. But what if you can't because you don't even realize what's going on? This means that we need to teach ourselves biology in a new reality. And this is the beauty of AI because it is now uncovering things that scientists, biologists may not yet have realized until now. So, welcome back, everyone, to a Mindset Medicine podcast. I am your host, Katharine Loucaidou, and this podcast is where we preserve our original thinking. We want emotional depth. We want to remain human in an AI-driven world. We want our human intelligence, but we want to mix it and merge with the creativity that we can get from AI. But the goal is not to lose our power as human beings in a world that is now obsessed with speed and scale and AI hacks. So how do we do that? Well, this is what this podcast is about. I'm going to help you preserve the beautiful parts of being human while enhancing the things that we do with AI. So, this particular episode is not just about mindset hacks, it's also going to be about biological truth, the psychological residue that you may have after a crisis or a trauma that you've experienced, or something that just deeply moved you. Perhaps it was even grief. And the real meaning of recovery in today's culture and society. So, I would love to start with the two scientific findings. They are most recent, and I think you're going to find them as interesting as I have. So, first, we're going to talk about the biology of lingering stress within you. So, this is from an article that was written by Arthur Lees et al. And researchers have discovered that after a stroke, the body forms innate immune memory. What does that mean? Your immune system doesn't just protect your brain, it actually remembers the trauma. And it keeps firing off alerts to the body even after you have visibly recovered. So, in mice, this immune memory caused inflammation in remote organs like lungs and liver. And these were organs that weren't even touched by stroke. But the system began seeing everything as a potential battlefield. So here's why this is profound. Because the body learns threat patterns. And even when there is silence, even when there is no crisis happening, we are not involved in any type of trauma, The body is still reacting long after the episode has ended. Can you recall a trauma, a crisis, any type of really severe episode that you have been through? And sometime later, you're still feeling off, but you don't know why. I'm going to get into that a little bit further down. Here is study number 2. VR avatars trigger a real immune activation. So this is from Nature Neuroscience 2025. 248 participants were placed in immersive VR. If you're not sure what that is, if you've ever seen people put on the virtual reality goggles or a headset and they're playing a video game, for example, this is what we're talking about. So they saw through this goggle or headset avatars, meaning people, images of people, coughing, sweating, showing signs of illness. So they're watching this through virtual reality. So it feels like it's real, it looks like it's real, but it's just a headset that they're wearing. There was no real virus. There was no physical exposure to the people who were watching these 248 people coughing, sweating, and showing signs of severe illness. But the brain registered a threat just from watching, and their immune system became activated. Lymphocytes, stress markers that were all measurable started firing as if they had the illness that they were watching. So here's what's really important that we don't always realize. Your mind can actually anticipate illness, and then your body just obeys. So when we talk about getting a really severe illness, so if we speak about cancer, we speak about a disease that has happened to us or an immunodeficiency disease. When these things happen, there is a very logical reason why everyone says remain positive. Think of a positive outcome. It's because your body reacts to what your mind is thinking about. And your immune system actually is responding to what you perceive as danger. So you may not be sick. You may not even be in an environment that where you can get a virus. Maybe you even work from home. Maybe you're home a lot during the day. But if your mind starts to perceive that on the box that you touched, from grocery shopping, whatever the simple thing that you did was, that you are going to somehow catch a virus or a disease, you have a better chance of manifesting that. Your body is actually responding to your brain input, not just the environments that you're in. So let's take this out of the biology lab and all the fancy words, and let's come into my life for a moment. I remember after my open heart surgery, and I had a stroke, and I was recuperating. So about 3 to 4 months afterward, I remember visiting the hospital again, and they couldn't even recognize me. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you look so different. You look great. You're healthy. Everything's fine." And I said, "Yeah, I was dressed nicely. My hair was done again. Obviously, I didn't look like death on a bed when I was on my deathbed." So what's interesting, and I'll never forget this conversation, I remember sitting down on a bench, and there was an older man who was about 2 seats further down on the bench from where I was. And, I looked over and I said to him, I said, "Oh, did you have heart surgery as well?" He said, "Yes, I did." And here's what no one really understood about what was happening in my life at the time during recovery. I did not realize that when you have been under anesthetic and you have lost a lot of blood, so I was in surgery probably about maybe close to 9 hours. I lost a lot of blood. which I then had to have a transfusion later on. But when you are under such heavy anesthesia for that long, not to mention that your heart has been removed and they are bypassing your arteries, and then the heart is reinserted, and then they're restarting you all over again. Throughout all of that, there is a lot that's happening because let's not forget, I may be under anesthesia, but the body is still listening and hearing. So, what was happening at home is I was hallucinating at night. And I had, by month 3, I was no longer taking painkillers. I wasn't taking any of that. I never wanted to get addicted, so I started scaling back by about week 3 and 4 out of the hospital, so that by month 3, I mean, I maybe a Tylenol I was on, that was about it. So there I was sitting on this bench with this older man, and I looked at him and I said to him, "Do you see things at night?" And his eyes went wide open and he looked at me. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "When you close your eyes at night and you try and fall asleep and then you open them, do you feel like you see things in the room?" And he said, "Yes." But he said, "I didn't tell anyone because they're going to think I'm crazy." I said, "I have the same problem." Now, remember that the internet was, but there were no articles about what happens when a patient is home after all of these different things that have happened. So on the outside, I have people saying, "You look so strong. You look so healthy. Good for you for bouncing back." But at night, I'm seeing things. I'm hearing things. I'm clenching my jaw when I'm sleeping because there's still trauma, like I'm still in the ICU going under surgery. So later on, what I did is I started looking into this. Why does this happen? Why is my brain thinking that there's stuff going on in the room? And let me tell you, it lasted for 10 years. Me thinking I was seeing shadows in my room at night. 10 years. And the reason is because when you're under such heavy anesthesia, your mind and brain are actually still active. You can still hear the doctors. I don't know that I can because I'm under, but your body understands what's still going on. So I looked like I was healed. The man sitting beside me on the bench looked like he was healed. But inside, there's so much more still going on. And my system and my brain didn't actually believe that I was healed. So this is the illusion of recovery. And you check all the boxes, you look great, you're acting fine, you return to work, you're playing the part of someone who's just fine. But your body seems to have its own scorecard. Have you ever had any symptoms that you could not explain after a traumatic situation that you almost felt like people would look at you funny if you were to tell them that you have these things happening? Well, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you and that this could be your body not yet recovered, even though in all sense of the word you are. So, what are some of the other reasons that this can happen? Our culture, no matter where you live, doesn't really teach us how to recover from a crisis, from a trauma, from medical, from grief. It doesn't, there's no lesson, there's no course to take on how to recover. We are taught how to mask symptoms, and we are taught how to perform like a fully functional, healthy, recovered person. But here's what's really happening. The productivity culture out there, so the high performers, high producers, if you're standing and you're working, you're fine. The medical systems, they treat your symptoms, but they're not treating your systemic memory of what's happened. The deeper part that's now ingrained into your DNA that you've been through. Social media glorifies bouncing back, glorifies looking great so quickly after a crisis and trauma. There's no pacing to allow for recovery, to allow for these deeper issues that may still exist. If you're an entrepreneur, you are rewarded for over-functioning and overperforming after being sick or having gone through a crisis. You're applauded for working so hard so quickly. And I know that that's what I did. So I was only 4 to 5 months recovered when I decided that I was going to do a startup business and open one of the islands, and this is the Mediterranean island I lived on, one of the first children's indoor play areas, 5,000 square feet, and create a business that didn't exist really on the island. So there was no model for it. My language was about 50% of what I would need to run a business like that. But I did it and I overperformed. But here's what happened. Even though the business was very successful, I was still so sick. I was still on so much medication at the time. And then I was having all of these side effects from the medication. So I would perform while I was doing these parties and these activities. And I was also teaching at the same time during the day and doing private lessons in between the time that I had parties at this entertainment center. It was insanity. But we perform and we overfunction. And what happens is we never actually give our body a chance to recover until 20 years later, we start to realize that there is this invisible trauma that still hasn't yet been fixed. And we have a different outlook on life than everyone else. And we look around and we think, why don't those people see life the way I do? Why don't they really understand what's going on? So you're reacting, but there's no name for it because you're past the point of having the crisis or the illness. Does any of this make sense? It does to me. And perhaps if you've been through a crisis or a trauma, you get what I'm talking about. With all these years later, there are still something lingering that you can't quite put your finger on. So here is another concept, and it's how we begin to try and treat the body. So we have something called perceptual detox, and your body is only as safe as the signals that it receives from your brain. Perceptual detox, which means you need to continually reduce the inputs that are reinforcing this feeling that you're having. So, are there triggers in your life that make you feel that you haven't fully recovered? Are there threats out there? So, for myself, I know that when I go and I love traveling, but I know when I get to a destination, if you were to blindfold me and drop me in a country, my body is going to know where I am before my mind is. And I'll tell you why. If there's extreme humidity, if the elevation is higher, if the air is thin, all of these different things, my body starts reacting in a second. I mean that my heart starts going 5 times faster. The elevation will make my my head feel light. Now, I know that many people can get altitude sickness, but I don't even have to be at the biggest altitude to get that. I have been at sort of medium altitudes and have felt the very same way. Even just going up a mountain on a drive, when I get to the top, I can feel all of it. So I actually have to tell myself, you're fine. You're at a higher altitude. This is just how it's going to be. You're going to drink some more water and you're going to be fine. I actually talk to my body. I had an episode when I was visiting Atlanta at a conference I was speaking at, and everyone decided to go out for dinner that evening. It was fine. It was a restaurant that was just a few doors down from the hotel. But here is what I hadn't realized: my body had felt a lot of stress to perform on stage at this conference. I really wanted to do a good job. So my body had been extremely tense for days leading up to it. And even on the day of, new audience, new city. And so I felt like I had a lot on the line career wise. And so once that was over, my body was still in a mode that it was trying to relax. But I hadn't really given it time because from then the conference, then everyone's going out for dinner. Here's what happened: I walk into this restaurant, sit down, and the only thing that had been ordered were some appetizers and I had a glass of water. That was it. Now, the environment of the restaurant, it was packed. It was so hot and humid in there because there were so many people. And of course, always on my mind is getting a virus, getting COVID, just because there are so many people in this place. Downtown Atlanta doesn't feel like the safest place either when you're walking around. So I had that feeling. So it was all of these things together. And as I'm drinking water and about to eat an appetizer, my iWatch starts blinking red, which I'd never happened before. So I look down and my heart rate had gone up to 125 beats per minute, which is insane because I'm sitting calmly in a restaurant. 125 beats per minute when you're sitting down is equal to me running out on the road in a marathon, for example, or lifting weights and doing something really strenuous. So something was wrong. And as I look at my watch, it goes up to 130 beats per minute, then 135. I know there is something happening. I'm hoping I'm not having a heart attack. I excuse myself from the table. I walk back to the hotel by myself. It's now dark, downtown Atlanta. I get to the hotel doors and they're locked because that's how safe it feels down there. They lock the hotel doors at night. I'm pressing the speaker button. No one's answering. I'm banging on the door. I cannot believe this is happening. Finally, a couple come out the door and I run in and I go up to my room. By now, my heart is at 140 beats per minute, way too fast. So here's what I know. I know the symptoms of a heart attack. And so I know that this could lead to one if I don't calm my heart down, my heartbeat down. So lay on the bed, put my feet up on 5 pillows because I need blood to rush back to my brain and my head. And I started drinking a Gatorade and some cold water. I put the air conditioning to the lowest temperature I could get it to. I think it was like 18 degrees Celsius in the room, so cold. And then I put it on full. And then I just talked to myself. You're fine. It's just the environment. It's the situation. You were hot. You're fine. You're fine. Breathing. Believe it or not, within 10 minutes, I got my heart rate back down to 90 beats per minute, which is just fine. And everything passed. But all of this was without me consciously realizing that I had this perception going on that I wasn't okay. My brain and body they weren't aligning. So this is my whole point, is that sometimes we have these inputs that we don't always realize are happening. All of these things that I have encountered through my life. And now that AI is ripe and it is expanding and it is taking over, but I still feel deeply strong about human intelligence. And how does this all come together? Because we have these patterns, right? These thinking patterns. And our patterns have come from our culture, they've come from our parents, they've come from our schooling. There are a lot of perceptions that we have that aren't all correct because sometimes we don't expand our thinking. However, I do believe that from what I'm seeing on social media right now, and I talked about this last episode, that people are handing over their intelligence so that AI will think for them and do their work instead of them, replacing them. So when we fast forward, if you watch this episode 2 years from now, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. We will have handed over so much of our intelligence into AI so that we can get quick, easy outputs. We're going to get quick ways to do our tasks and so on. However, if AI is solely thinking for us and you are taking what you see on ChatGPT or Grok or Perplexity, and you're just throwing that back onto social media as your post, you have now given up your intelligence and your thinking because you're allowing it to be your narrator of your life instead of merging and blending. Brainstorm together, get some ideas together. This episode was done together between Grok, ChatGPT, and myself. The only way that I'm able to do this episode is because I know what it is that I'm talking about when we have this time together. So I'm not just pulling from the AI, I do for the research and I do for any frameworks or strategies that I want to help you with. But then I blend it in together with what I know and have experienced as a real life human being, and then we put it all together. So the system that I have created that will be for keynote speeches that I do, they will be for workshops that I do, and for a course that I am right now creating for coaching, is I am trying to help people see these layers of conditioning that they have from the past, right? From where you've learned from schooling and so on. And I want it to help you to recognize who is thinking for you. When you are creating from now into the future, is it you or is it AI? And how do we retain you in all of this? You as the human being. How do we retain your voice, your creativity in a world that says, but I can do it faster for you? I want to help regulate the human intelligence in an AI world. So here is your medicine, your mindset medicine after today's episode. So we've talked about how a crisis or trauma in the form, for example, of stroke or open heart surgery or anything that you may have gone through still lives within you. We have talked about the VR glasses and how just watching someone else feel sick and have symptoms actually affects us and helps and may actually manifest an illness within ourselves just from watching someone else. So what we watch and hear and experience matters. Think about that when you choose to watch or read or listen to stories, too much social media, too many emotionally traumatic stories. The world is full of trauma and hurt right now. Just make sure that you are filtering all these things that you are listening to through the lens of, from what perspective has this story been told? Is it sensationalism for media? Because if it is, it's going to be very emotionally gripping. Or is this a real, true story, right? Everything you watch and listen to should be through the lens of perspective. Who is telling this story? What is their bias to tell this story? And by asking these very logical questions, the result of listening to all of this noise will affect you less and will help your internal traumas heal, which means you will then have less symptoms as time goes on. You don't need to push harder, to act better and normal. You just need to interrupt the signals that are being created in your body. So here is one practice for you. And I do this a lot, is wherever I am, especially when you start to feel anxious or you start to feel worried. Oh my gosh, what if I get this? What if I get this illness? What if I become sick later? What if in 5 years' time, whatever happens? Instead of fear mongering your future, think about where you are now. Close your eyes. Where are you right now? Right now, you're listening to this podcast. What are you doing? Are you sitting? Are you standing? Can you hear other noises around you? When you can bring yourself back to the present, it will help to break patterns of you fear mongering your future. When I stopped doing that, fast forwarding, but what if this happens? But what if? When I stopped using those words in my entire vocabulary, I started healing at a much quicker pace. Your body is brilliant. It is smart. It has held you up for all these years. Help keep your mind free so that your body remains healthy. The intelligence here that I want you to remember is that you're not crazy for thinking that there are things that might be wrong. You're not crazy to think that sometimes there are some days when things feel off and you just can't explain it. It's because there are things deep inside you that just haven't healed yet. So give yourself grace to heal over time. Because even though you may not see it, and even though the blood test and the medical system says that you're fine, we still have things that are ingrained within us that we still need to heal from. And that's really all we need to focus on. I hope you have found this episode helpful. Noases is the name of the framework that I am working on. And if you'd like to know more, if this is something that you think your work or other people, a group that you belong to, have interest in, reach out to me. I hope you will share this episode with someone who may have been through something traumatic, a crisis, or maybe just something that they can't explain. Share it with them. Share it on social media. Tag me if you have found this interesting. And I'm going to see you again next week with some other incredible things that are happening in AI. Because let's not forget, AI truly is unbelievable. I love it. But I just don't want humans to trade their intelligence and their creativity for something that doesn't have emotion. Just use it for your tasks and brainstorming. But don't forget who you are, that beautiful human being that has wonderful ideas that cannot compete with AI. AI will just help enhance them for you. Bye for now.